Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody?
Well, that is right. I am Chris.
And I'm Christine, and welcome to episode 65 of the Chris and Christine Show. Do-do-do-do.
Fantastic. And if you heard that little jingle, it only can mean one thing. And what is that, Christine?
That it is countdown to wedding day.
Dun, da, da, da. Wedding day is here upon us this week. Amazing. I am so nervous.
Are you?
I am so much anxiety, and I'm nervous. And I'm excited, because there's a lot of pressure figuring this all out, getting the whole wedding thing taken care of. It's been a big stress on our entire lives over the last year or so, especially with COVID.
Yeah, well, tell me more about this anxiety, because this is this is the first time that you've really talked with me about the anxiety of the wedding. But what is it that goes through a guy's head right before the wedding?
I think what it is, it's like, well, I'm also a little bit of a perfectionist, as we found out a few minutes off air before we started. And that's because of my perfectionism, I have to have everything done right and correctly. So if there's any flub or anything, any mishaps, I try to be the one there taking control and getting figured out. And the fact that I'm leaving control up to other people to get this done for our wedding, it's a little stressful,
I didn't even think about it like that. That makes a whole lot of sense, that your anxiety is peaking around that unpredictability. And I think that's what I've tried to help have other people that I know are also perfectionists be involved, to know that they're going to execute things to the level of what we're hoping for. But that makes total sense, because I'm just telling you, babe, you and the boys just need to get dressed and show up and have fun. But does that actually help you have fun, or does that give you more anxiety?
Well, we're having the wedding at a separate location, and then we're having the reception back at our house, which is going to be all decked out with decorations and tables and chairs and people serving food and valet service and all that stuff happening at my house. And I kind of like to have
your house.
I'm sorry, our house. I always got my house, probably because when I bought it,
it was
myself.
Yours. Yep.
Yes, it was mine. So at our house, everything's going to be happening here, and I'm going to be trying to figure out, wanting to figure out how to coordinate everything and be handling everything. This goes here, that goes there, this, that. But I'm going to be somewhere else, and I have to leave it up to somebody else to take care of it. That's a little stressful.
Honey, repeat with me.
What's that?
Let it go.
Let it go. Let it go. Yes.
You really do have to, because at this point in the game, I have helped to get everything planned the way you want it to be.
You did. It was amazing.
And I want you to have such a beautiful day. And I know this is going to be really, really hard for you, but you have to release control a little bit.
I'll try. It's hard.
I know it is.
It's hard, especially with so many moving components to this wedding. There's all these different with vendors and venues and people coming and not coming and all the stuff we got. Stuff we have to set up with, buying the alcohol like you did today.
I did it all.
Doing all this fun stuff.
I just said to you, babe, I need you to get this amount of money from the bank to help us pay the last little tidbit.
That amount was $100,000 in cash.
You goofball.
And I went to the bank. I said, I want a briefcase too. It's handcuffed to my wrist. So when I walk out of there, I'm like a baller. I got my metal suitcase full of my $100 bills.
Well, okay. So I need to ask you a very important question. Your anxiety and everything, does it have to do anything with actually marrying me?
I don't think so. I think more of the whole process, but I do love you and I do get very excited to marry you. And I was thinking about this today, about how Christine was out today figuring out all the details, the last minute details of the wedding, putting it all together. And I was looking at her and she's telling me all this stuff. And I'm thinking, wow, this girl over here is so excited about marrying me. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with her? Why does she want to marry me of all people? And she's super excited to marry me, and thank you for that, babe. But I'm looking at it from my perspective, is why would you want to marry me of all the people in the world you could possibly be marrying? You want to marry me, and I kind of feel very humble and very thankful that you want to marry me. It's
You're making me cry right now.
Why?
Well, first of all, because I want you to see yourself through my eyes when you think why would she want to marry me? The way I look at it is like, you're my hero. You're my superhero.
Aw.
You're the king of this castle. And I look up to you in so many ways. And I look to you for support. And you're my best friend. And there is nobody else I would want to marry. You're my person. And I just get so excited about having a future with you. And so it just makes me sad when you say, like, why would she want to marry me? I'm very humbled that you think of me like that, that you put me on a pedestal. But
well, I do.
But I look at you and I think, like, you've given me so much love and you've helped me to really kind of be more comfortable in my own skin and helped me to explore my own talents. And you've supported me my whole journey with my schooling, and you've taken Ezekiel in and you just love him, and you guys have such a special relationship. And I get so excited about marrying you. And I guess I don't think like, oh, like, what does he see in me? I look at it as like, I found my person, like my perfect match. And like, I feel like we were two whole people before this, and we're just a dynamic duo. And I really am super excited to marry you.
And I'm excited to marry you too, babe. And I was also thinking is that being that we are in the midst of COVID and that you have been structured to do your work from home,
right?
Like you're home now all the time, and I get to see you so much more.
Yeah.
I think
Do you get sick of me?
that's the thing. I have not.
Aww.
And that is definitely truth, because I am going to be marrying you. And I think that had COVID not happened, it's almost like a test, really.
Yeah.
You know, like, can we weather COVID being together as much as we have been?
Yeah.
And if we could not, then I don't think marriage would be the right decision.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying.
Right. It's almost like a little test phase, like, because I think a lot of people right now, unfortunately, because they are stuck together,
Right.
things are going south.
Right.
And ours just went the opposite.
Right.
We got closer together. You are my best friend. I share
Aw.
everything with you. You know, I wake up every morning and I run downstairs and I get coffee going and I get so excited and I text you from downstairs. I text you to upstairs and I say, hey, you want some coffee? Because it's our old coffee date time. And
It is. And you know what? I do try to build in a 20-minute break or a 30-minute break to my mornings for work. You know, everybody's entitled to like a 15 to 20-minute break from work. And so I love to come down and have a cup of coffee with you in the morning. And I try to build that into my calendar at least like 3 or 4 days a week, because it's so important and it's become a routine. And, you know, I was thinking about this. My parents do that, and they have done that since I was little. Like,
Really?
Yes, they have. And now they sit in the living room and they have coffee together. But I don't know if I've actually ever told you this, but growing up, my dad always woke up really early. And when I was really young, he went to this restaurant. It was called the Dala Horse. Dala is like
Dala what now?
Dala Horse. I grew up in a Swedish town, and the Dala Horse is like it's a horse, but it's a symbol of good energy, hope, and joy in the Swedish culture. And so this little cafe my dad would go to every morning, and my mom would get up early. She'd get me ready because my sisters could get themselves to school. And she'd take me down and we would have coffee with my dad. They would start their morning off together. And then that continued all the way, you know, whenever my mom could, possibly like 2 or 3 days a week. And sometimes it was very early before her shift at the hospital, and they would have coffee together. And sometimes they'd take me, sometimes they wouldn't. And they still have continued that. And so when we have our time together, it reminds me of such a fond memory of my childhood, of my parents starting their morning together and connecting with each other and having conversation and small talk. And they're each other's best friends. And I'd always looked at that as something that I'd hoped for. And then it just naturally happened with us through COVID. And it's been such a beautiful gift for me.
I know it's one good thing of COVID is having you here. And I really, really do love having you here.
Oh, thanks.
It has allowed us to podcast a lot more than we have ever had before.
That's the hidden thing, is he really wanted to podcast as much as possible.
That's true. And we do a lot of interviews on our show, and thank God, because you were being home more often, we were able to pull this off.
Right,
and
on my lunch breaks.
On your lunch breaks from work, and because you're already here at the house.
Right, I just walk across the hall.
Right, easy over to the studio, and,
Yeah.
and we get it all done. So that's been great, and I do appreciate you having you here every day, and it's just been so amazing. Just having you around so much it puts so much joy, and that's why I hate going to work and leaving you. Not that I hate my job, but I hate leaving to go to work and leaving you here at the house, and you're realizing, gosh, I want to stay here, and that's probably why I really do enjoy Vacation Chris the best.
I enjoy Vacation Chris the best too,
because I'm home with you, and it's home, and the kids are here now, and everything's great, and it's not raining this week for the wedding, so that's fantastic also.
Well, what are you most looking forward to in our life together?
I think what I'm most looking forward to with our lives together is the fact that it is definitely a team, and it's a teamwork. We're going to be bonding our forces, so to speak, and that I don't feel so stressed out as I used to doing things all by myself.
Yeah.
It's a partnership that I never had before. And I think that it's very exciting times, and I love it.
I'm so glad. That just makes me so happy. And, it has taken us a lot to get to this point in terms of our journey. And I know you and I have had to overcome some really hard things in our past. And we had to individually deal with those hurts and process through them and learn how to be single parents and learn how to support ourselves and be independent. And, all of the things that come along with getting back up after going through a divorce. And we actually had the opportunity to talk about that, right?
Yes, we were exclusively interviewed by the
10 Steps Further podcast, right?
Who's the pastor? It was
Pastor Jack Hawkins.
Jack and
Jonathan.
Jonathan. Jack and Jonathan. Now, Pastor Jack happens to be the pastor that's going to be marrying us for our wedding.
Yeah, and we talk about it on our interview with him about how we met, but I will totally tell you, we typically don't talk about two things, faith and politics. Well, we broke that rule last week, and we apologize if we offended anybody for that about politics. But in terms of faith, we very much have a strong faith, Chris and I do, and we were really struggling to find an officiant for our wedding. And we'd gone through multiple people, and some weren't available, some were already booked, and some were just way out of our price range because I didn't realize that officiants actually charge down in San Diego.
I didn't even know that either. I thought it was like a free service, like a thing, but
it's not. And so, we were just trying to figure it out and had gone through a whole list, and I just decided to look one more time. I said a prayer, and I looked one more time, and instead of emailing, I picked up the phone and called this individual, and he happened to be such a kind person and actually a pastor in a local church and a pastor in the denomination that I grew up in.
Right. So it made it so much more comfortable for you to make the decision to have him marry us off.
Right. And so we had the opportunity. It was a couple months ago, right, Chris?
Yeah, it was probably during the summer, I think, wasn't it?
I think so. Maybe it was shortly after we made the decision to cancel our Hawaii wedding, which would have been in August. And we had the opportunity to sit down with Pastor Jack and Pastor Jonathan over at Canyon Springs Church. And we got the chance to really share in depth our story of what we went through and then what it's like to now be in love, right?
That's right. And they were very gracious enough to let us have that audio from that interview. And what are we going to do with that, Christine?
Well, we made the decision to not have a guest on during wedding week. And instead, what Chris and I wanted to do for the first time on our show is to really share our journey in depth. And we're really hopeful that our struggles and our finding love after loss and after divorce will be an encouragement to you all out there. And so for this episode, which is our special wedding week episode, we want to share with you our journey of how we got back up.
Hey there, K2 crew. We love having you as our loyal listeners.
To keep up to date with what's happening behind the scenes, check us out on social media.
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter.
And don't forget to follow our Facebook page.
Yeah, tag us in your favorite fun stories, and guess what? You might just end up on the show.
Ooh.
Jack and I are here with a couple of guests from another podcast in another place.
I know. A guest that loved their podcast so much that he was willing to change his name for the podcast.
You're not supposed to say that. That's our inside secret.
It's all fake.
We actually had this conversation last week. So in this COVID season, I do a bunch of weddings, right? Typically, and all those weddings are canceling. and I have these people who are calling me, hey, you want to meet me on the beach? Can we meet here and there, whatever? And so I got a phone call from Christine just last week because Christine is marrying Chris.
Yep.
Not Chris with a C. Maybe that was last year. Chris with a K now, so that the podcast matches. And so we got in this conversation about kind of what your lives have been through and your podcast and what that all looks like. And I think we have some good wisdom to give people in their lives and a kind of interesting story. So why don't you just give us a little background on yourselves, guys?
So I'm Christine, and I've lived down here in San Diego County for about 5 years. So I work in education up until November 20th, I guess, technically, when we get married. I've been a single mom for the last 5 years of a now 15-year-old. And like I mentioned to you earlier, Jack, I am finishing up my doctorate in May, so I'm very excited. Go Trojans, USC.
She's rubbing it in right now because my son went to UCLA, but we may bring that up a little bit later.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's great. And Chris?
Hey, what's happening, everybody? I am Chris with a K of the world famous Chris and Christine show.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I've lived in San Diego my entire life, all 100 years of it, and never left town, and I don't plan on leaving town. So that's just me. But I met Christine 2 years ago.
Yeah, just 2 years and change.
Yeah, 2 years ago, and we met on a little website called Match.com. Perhaps you've heard of it. And she hit me up, by the way.
Generally what I say about couples when they meet like this is from the beginning, you were the perfect match.
Oh,
At least
that's
according
true.
to Match.com.
That's true.
So, so that was you guys. You met on Match.com. Yeah, you told the whole, gave us a story beforehand. Essentially, you were doing the discount dating. As long as Match gave you a little deal, you would continue to follow that. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the way the Match works is that you pay for like a block of time of use, like a subscription. So when your subscription runs out, you make sure you cancel that. Otherwise, they jack up the rates like triple the amount you were paying earlier because they give you a discount rate to get you started, like a little teaser. So get you in, and I would try to cancel it. And then when I go cancel it, they would say, "Hey, hang on a second. Why don't you try a little bit longer for, say, 20%?" Okay. So I keep it going.
He loves
and then
a deal.
I love a deal. I love it. Who doesn't?
So it's for those people like, man, I really want a soulmate, but I just don't want to spend that much money on it.
Right. Oh,
So-
spend something. I advise everybody, do not use the free dating apps out there because who knows what you're going to get,
Right.
But anyway, we paid for the service. So we're actually paying customers. Even though it was a discount, it was paying customers.
Yeah,
So anyways,
so great.
she hit me up to
Every time he tells this story, he makes sure that everyone knows that he did not make the first move.
of course.
But the reality is that he had checked out your profile like how many times?
4 times.
Okay, so-
what happens on
It
Match?
comes up in the feed. There's like a feed they give you.
But you have
It's in the feed.
You have to click into it. Come on, give me something. You had to have a little bit of interest.
Okay. So she hit me up with a message first. What'd you say in that first message? Do you remember?
I can't remember. Just something simple like, "Hey, how's it going? I see that we are both single parents and have some common interests. Maybe we should chat." Just something basic like that.
Hey, how you doing? That's what
That's
guys
so funny
do.
because Chris just said that you said what a nice butt he had. I think that's what I remember.
I don't know how she could have seen that because I didn't have any pictures like that.
They don't do
No.
backsides?
No,
Okay,
no.
all right.
And
That probably makes a lot of sense.
You can get the backside on the free apps.
Yes,
I
you
will
did.
say I was very impressed that he did not have the atypical or the typical shirtless selfie picture because I would have just gone right by
Well, I
that.
gave you that one later.
Yet again, he is shirtless in the as we are doing the podcast right now. So coming up in November. What's the date?
20th.
November 20th. We're going to make this whole thing official.
Yep.
But there's a lot of backstory that
Yeah,
has come. In
definitely.
fact, that's really the basis for your podcast too.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
This is a second marriage for both of you, and both were taken down by unfaithfulness. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, that's true. Christine was actually married longer than I was. You got married really, really young.
Well, I mean, kind of young. So Chris and I were very open about all of our background and all of the struggles, but I met my former spouse. He was my first boyfriend. We met, I was in the Christian sorority and he was in the Christian fraternity at our university. And a year later, we started dating. We dated for 3 years, and we were leaders in our college group at church. And then he proposed. We were engaged for 6 months and got married. We were married by the time of divorce, just almost 11 years. We'd been separated for a year prior. Served in ministry, served in the church. He was a deacon of the church, and in a pretty large church where we lived in Central California. I was in frontline worship team, and on the outside, and even to my belief, we were that picture perfect American family.
Right.
I mean, we had the
Right.
dog. We literally had the white picket fence. We only had one child. We vacationed. We did like everything that people dream about being able to do. And then one day we were celebrating my birthday down at Disneyland. We were on a family trip, and everything fell apart while I was 4.5 hours away from home, and he was in the shower, and I stumbled across a text message that just imploded my world. And over the course of the next 2.5 months, progressively more and more information came out. But bottom line is, my former spouse had been unfaithful through a deep-seated pornography addiction, as well as virtual and in-person affairs with 7 different women that I was
Wow.
able to identify. But then as everything came to light, I found out that the infidelity had started 1 week into our relationship. And so it just makes you look back and doubt if everything was a lie all the way along, because there was all of this betrayal behind the scenes. And so I had to grapple with that. We worked for the same employer. It was a very public breakup. And so everybody was in our business from day one. In the church, when you're frontline leaders, it's like when you watch the news and you hear of XYZ pastor. I mean, when somebody's leading a very prominent ministry in the church and you're typically on the stage, and then people see you down at the altar kind of falling apart, everybody gets in your business. So,
Especially a small town like that, right?
well, I mean, I was up in a bigger town in Central California, not as big as San Diego, but it was the only school district that we worked for. Everybody knew us. They knew us as a power couple.
Yeah.
So, so I didn't make the decision to divorce. We made the decision to separate and work on the relationship, and went into intense therapy. Unfortunately, my previous spouse couldn't break away from the addiction and from the other women. And finally, at one point, I really felt like God released me from the relationship, but I had to wait on him. Like, I didn't rush into that, and lots of prayer went into it and lots of wise counsel. But finally, at some point, I felt that the Lord was saying, this is not how I intended for you to live. And I give you permission. And I never knew that the voice of God would be like that. Like, I mean, in the Bible, it says divorce is a sin, or, it says you shouldn't get divorced and be separated. And so I just felt like very confused and not knowing exactly who I
It was
was.
strange times for you.
Right. Very.
Well, I would imagine that not only is it, hey, is this relationship been real all the time?
Right.
But the amount of self-doubt too,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like
What is it in me that's not enough? That
Right.
you have to seek out 7 different women, and that you have to seek out this digital means to get your fulfillment. And, there was other things that were happening behind the scenes that I wasn't sharing with people at the time that Chris is aware of. There was some domestic violence involved in our relationship, and some physical injuries that I was enduring. And I just didn't know that wasn't normal.
Right.
We
Sure.
didn't, in the church, you talk about, being very transparent, no sex before marriage, and you go through premarital counseling, and it's not always the most open. And I didn't know the way that things should and shouldn't be. So I didn't know that things that were happening to me weren't okay.
right.
And so when everything comes to light and you finally are processing through all of that, it was dealing with being victimized, being traumatized, being betrayed. And then on top of it, he had taken my credit and ran it up. And so I was left with about $57,000 worth of debt that I had to manage.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Now, just to give you guys an idea where we're going, this podcast is going to be called Getting Back Up, right?
Right.
But there's a down bottom to that, right?
Yeah.
And you definitely hit the bottom. Now, Jonathan, I was thinking as she was sharing, how often our perception of God is he's gonna be disappointed with me. He's gonna, where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, like you're saying, cultural. Like I think that we're in this place that we have painted Christianity to be a version of clean that it isn't. And so when I mean, I don't know, I feel like that's where secrets live, because people are like, I'm probably the only person who struggles with anything in this whole church, because nobody ever puts it forward, and then every once in a while somebody does, and they're like, "Oh, that guy's worse than me, man. I'm not gonna." And people are talking about him now, and so I'm not, So I think that there's a lot of that goes on that like you said, in premarital counseling, it's not always the most open. Like, that's the whole state of marriage in churches, I think, is like there's just this constant. There's two sides of it. There's the public side and there's the private side, in every home. So
and nobody's perfect. We're all sinners,
right?
Well, there's just so much that it encouragement to hide as much as possible, but really growth, authenticity leads to wholeness, for us to be there. Now, Chris, you experienced a different situation, but in some ways similar as well, right? You want to take us back to that story?
Yeah, I got married back in 2008, and we had a child 2 years after that, our first child.
Okay.
Jacob. And she was a lot younger than me, so I thought at the time when I got together with my ex-wife that maybe she was kind of like over the younger type of stuff, like the partying, the going out, she seemed a little more mature for her age. So I kind of took that perspective, thinking like, I don't know, she's kind of young, but okay. She was like 8 years younger than me, I think.
Okay.
Or something like that. So, but anyways, we had our first child, and then, she went back to work, and I was working full time at night because I work at night, and then I would take care of the child during the day, and then work at night. And then as soon as I got a better job, she's like, every time I had a job, I got a new job, she wanted to have a kid, which is weird. She just wanted to have a kid. It's the second I got a pay raise, she wanted a kid. I don't know if that's something to that or what's up with that. But so we did. We had our second child.
We celebrated by going out to dinner. I don't know.
Well, that's how it's at least. That's the start. And
You
then it
think
goes to the
so?
next thing.
So maybe it started with dinner. Okay. We don't want. Can we not talk about that?
So every time I had a pay raise, she wanted a new child, which I thought was kind of odd. 'Cause I loved having the single child, and I kind of honestly just wanted the single child, but she wanted a second child, so we had a second child. And then after the second child was born, everything started falling apart. Like, she was gone a lot. She would spend the night at someone else's house, like a friend of hers house, a lot. She was, the second I'd wake up in the morning, she would take off and go into the gym, or take off and go into there. I'm taking off, and dump me with the kids at an early age. And I would have to take care of them, all by myself, plus have to work all night long. And then have my mom come in and help out, when I had to go to work or whatever. And she was always gone. Say she was at work. And then she had a friend from work staying in our guest room for a little bit because she had a place to stay or whatever. So she was staying with us for a little while. And then she's the one that really broke the news to me what was going on with my ex-wife. Kind of because they all work together and they're in the same circle group and things like that. And she told me, people she was with and people she was hanging out with, and how now she's dating this new guy. And I'm like, what? We're married. Dating what? What are you talking about?
So let me ask you, what does that feel like in that one moment where you realize that this person has stepped out on you?
To me, I was so angry. I was so upset. I was spinning. I had to call my boss at work and tell him I can't come in. I cannot do my job because I am emotionally a wreck. and I am devastated, and I need to take as much time off as you're going to let me have. And that's what I did. I think I took like 2 weeks off or whatever. Went to therapy, all that stuff. And had to go through the whole divorce thing, had to go through all that stuff. The first thing I want to do is I just want to just anger. I just wanted to get back at them as much as I possibly can. That's
Sure.
me personally. 'Cause
Right.
I'm very quick.
Yeah.
I'm a very hot-headed guy, and I get really quick to, Christine will tell me. You're laughing over there. So, but I get very angry and very quick, but then I kind of like it fizzles out. I explode and I kind of, so I got very angry at first with my ex-wife. And, the first thing I wanted to do was just divorce. I wanted to see what my rights were. I wanted to see about get a lawyer, talk to different people. Because I was watching the kids and had the kids all the time, and I even sent out a really nasty like message or text out to all her family members. I mean, her too, of course. It was very, very devastating because I had to take care of these kids all by myself. I felt like she just took off.
Right.
And how old were they, Chris?
Oh, they were very little. Like my oldest was, I think, 4. I think, and my youngest was like not even 1.
Yeah, I get it. Right. That anger, that feel. I mean, I've never experienced that, but I can see how what you thought was true, and then all of a sudden it comes crashing down, and all of a sudden you have the truth.
It's like it's an emotion that you don't even have words for. It's like anger and devastation and the betrayal and the loss of a dream and like this eroded hope. I mean, I remember we each have our different low points, but I remember having my breaking point. After I found out it was on a Sunday, I went into work the next day and I had to let my staff know because I was the principal of a school. You can't just not show up when you're the principal and you're going into state testing. Like you have to be there. And so I hadn't eaten all week. I remember I didn't eat. I was barely sleeping. He was out of the house right then. But by Friday, I hit my breaking point. And then on that Friday night, my mom and my dad had stayed with me all day. And, my mom took me to Target to get a few basics and I fainted in the store.
Wow.
Luckily, she's a medical professional and she took me to get food. But that night, some more information sprung up suddenly on his tablet that was still at the house. And I remember leaving the house barefoot and just telling my mom, she picked me up in the car and I just said, drive out in the country. And I remember being on my knees with bare feet in the middle of a field because I lived out on the edge of this town where I lived and literally crying with a cry and a groan that I'd never heard come out of myself before because the devastation was that deep.
Right.
And people don't frequently talk about that and the trauma that happens. Like you hear so much on the media, so-and-so got cheated on, and you hear about that happening with celebrities. But what people don't see is that depths of despair. I mean, like Chris's example, he's exhausted working full time at night trying to provide for his family and his 2 kids and is now left to figure out what to do with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And all because he helped to create the life that his partner dreamt of. And it's just.
When I hear that story, it reminds me of, when God talks about his relationship with his people, like throughout the Old Testament, he's talking about the unfaithful, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. The word that he uses is he's a jealous God, right? So if anybody gets it, it's God gets it,
Right.
right? I'm finding too that as I get older, that what God wants most for me is I grow in my relationship with God when I can experience things like God has experienced, right? When you love somebody and they don't love you back, or you love somebody and you get hurt by that. But you both have experienced this. I love somebody who was unfaithful to me.
Right.
That's the entire experience of God with the nation of Israel and with us as well. It's just as people, right?
Right.
Because even, I know Jonathan's a pretty good guy, but you and I, we're pastors of churches that do our own things as well, right?
What do you mean?
Like there are times when we disappoint God or when we,
Oh man,
right?
All the time. I mean, that's the journey. Whether it's, I think, and that's the myth is that the people with the perfect marriage have a perfect marriage. Like maybe I've met people like that, but they've never for real. Like the more I get to know people, now that's not to say there's not depths like
Right.
you're talking about. That's something
Sure.
different. But recognizing it's just like, recognizing in our world, it's just like, I think there's a lot of people who from the outside would say one thing and from the inside, like, and I feel like I have a great marriage. Great. I've been married for 22 and a half years.
Wow.
And
Congratulations, by the way.
That's amazing.
and I would say we have a great marriage, but it's like there's rough seasons and there's like, and you got 3 kids that are teenagers and so you just like, in some ways I can look at the failings, and then in other times I can look at like, oh, here's the successes.
Right.
That's the journey of 22 and a half years.
Sure. And there's a lot of people who don't experience the 22 years of faithful being together.
Right.
22 and a half years of faithful and being together doesn't mean that everything's easy,
No.
but you're right. And I shared with this before we started. According to the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, national surveys indicate that 15% of married women and 25% of married men have had extramarital affairs, and that goes up 20% when you include emotional and sexual relationships without intercourse. The amount of people cheating. And here's the story, right? Like you'll see movies and you'll see
Right.
TV shows, and it'll portray it as one thing, and yet I don't think there's anybody that has walked through that hasn't felt that devastation.
Right. And what people see is a marriage is broken up, and then what tends to happen for an individual is they'll kind of fall off the grid for a little bit, and I think of when an individual loses a family member, there's a grieving process and people surround them.
Right.
And they bring them meals and they want to provide for them. It's different when you go through something like infidelity because people don't know how to respond.
Right.
It's almost sometimes like they feel like it's contagious. And like,
Contagious?
I don't
What do you mean?
like, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to give you space until you work through
So
it.
let me ask you a question. So if we have people who are listening, have a friend who's wandered through that, what would you say? Here are the 3 things or 4 things that you can do for that person to support them in that moment.
I would say that the most important thing for me in that moment was to have somebody that was willing to come and sit with me. This is a woman's perspective. So
Okay.
to sit with me and to not try and fix anything or to make me feel better. Really sitting with empathy, like listening to your story and letting you talk through it as much as you need to. I remember one time, it was, a couple months in, right after I had filed for divorce because I was the one who finally had to make that decision. I was having a really low night and I just texted my sister. At this point, my son and I had moved in with my mom because we lost the house and everything.
Right.
And my sister came across the street and she just laid on the bed in the dark with me while I had my sad music playing in the background. And the first thing she comes in is, "Why are you listening to that sad music?" And I said, "Don't judge my grief right now." And she just crawled in bed next to me and just wrapped her arms around me and let me cry. And I think that being able to sit in someone else's sorrow without having
Right.
to make it feel comfortable for you it's a real skill.
They're not trying to fix you. They're not trying to tell you everything's going to be good. They're
Right.
just there, right?
Right. That, or because I had a child, having somebody say, "Can I come and pick up your
right.
son
Yeah.
for a couple of hours so you can shower?" Because, kids, you have to hold things together to a certain amount when you have a child because their world has just imploded. They no longer have one of their parents in the house. You're trying to redefine this and figuring out how to juggle. So something as simple as, "Can I pick up your son or your daughter and just take them for a Happy Meal and give you a little bit to
Yeah.
get your nails done?" Because you no longer have a partner in this.
Right.
And so you've lost your
Right.
security, you've lost a
Right.
partner. And I know that's something that Chris and I talked about is he was suddenly faced with single parenting 2 young boys.
Right.
One who was barely eating solid foods. It's
Right.
that is
Diapers,
exhausting.
Yeah. So, how would you answer that, Chris, with a K?
Oh, well, I'll answer as Chris is with a C right now.
Okay.
So what Chris would say, he would say that, but no, I think for a guy's perspective, you always want to try to just fix it and move on to the next thing. I mean, that's me
Right.
personally. I just want to just fix the problem, and just be on to the next section of life. And I think it's kind of, for me, I took a lot of time off to really kind of reflect on what the next moves are going to be, because everything had to be
Right.
strategically done, with a divorce, with a child, situation with the children, who's going to watch them when, this and that, figuring out the money situation, splitting everything down the line. There was a lot going into figuring out to just splitting it apart, and I knew that was what was going to happen. I didn't want to, do a divorce. I wanted her to stay around and even work it out. And like Christine did, went through counseling. I was willing to do that, but she wanted nothing to do with that. She was checked out. She was done.
Yeah, I spoke with a counselor who deals with these situations, and he says 99% of the time when you're in counseling, somebody says, "Yeah, I just don't want to do it." They've already moved on from you.
Right.
They've moved on to that next person.
Right.
And that's what happened in my situation. Is that the person she left me for was another coworker of hers, and she had a child with him.
Oh my.
Very shortly after.
Yeah, very shortly after, and they moved in together. They're not together now, but she has the child with him and all this stuff, and
So you had to, in some ways, you had to allow yourself the time to grieve that loss, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's not really a guy thing. You want to
yeah.
fix it. You want to move on. You want to
Right.
buy a lifted truck, whatever, right?
I have that too. It's
Okay.
But no, I was saying was that it was hard, because I think right before, like, she even came back to me after I think it was even funny, even after we signed the divorce papers, even after everything was said and done, maybe a week after that, she even mentioned, like, maybe this was a bad idea, and maybe we should seriously consider, like,
Wow.
working on it or whatever. And I gave her the benefit of the doubt for like a day. And then the very next day, it was back to, "I hate you, and I'm going this way, and you're going that way."
Wow. Let me ask you guys.
Sure.
When was the moment? What was the turnaround moment? When was the God moment when you realized he was there and you're gonna be okay?
So mine was a very distinctive moment. I'd reconnected with my best friend from high school who lived in Ventura County, who had just gone through, he was a guy, had just gone through a similar thing. And I said, I could really use a good friend that's gone through this. Can we meet for lunch? So I was driving out to Ventura from Central California, and it was the long stretch after Magic Mountain out towards Ventura County coastline. And the day before in my church, one of my friends had been singing the offertory song, and it was by a Christian artist named Blanca, and I loved it. So I downloaded that album, and I was listening to it streaming on my radio. And as I was driving, the Blanca songs were coming on, and I was just praying, like, God, this is so hard. This is exhausting. I'm in therapy 4 or 5 times a week between the couple stuff and the individual stuff. And God had given me a word before, pause, persist, and pray. Like, don't do anything until I tell you. And this song by Blanca came on, and it was called Today. And it says, like some of the lyrics of the word or of the song say, you've got today to live and to live again. And there was these very hopeful words around, you're going to be okay. Like, you can move forward. And it was, God spoke to me in that moment, and I pulled to the side of the road and I broke down crying, and I called my mom and I said, I can let go of this now. I'm going to need some help to get through this. And my parents helped me with an attorney and like figuring out an attorney. But in that moment, I felt like God said, I release you, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to provide for you. And what's before you is better than what you've left behind. And so I just had that hope. And that word of what comes before you is so much greater than what's behind you has been the thing that's guided me every step of the way since then.
Wow. So it's interesting. We'll have this conversation with so many different people that there was a moment when God literally showed up, right?
Right.
And it's undeniable. And you say that to people that are outside the church, go, that you guys are just making that stuff up. And yet I haven't met any Christian person that hasn't experienced that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Chris, was there a moment for you where it was just a God moment and you just knew that, or a time when you felt like you turned the corner?
I think, well, I went through a lot of phases, I think, after the divorce, because when I got divorced, our company just changed names, just changed companies. So it got bought out by another company. So a lot of people, including myself, because of the divorce, had to cash out their 401k, cash everything out, and split it down the middle to give the ex-wife. We're splitting everything down the middle.
Wow.
So I did something kind of stupid. I cashed everything out and went shopping. It's kind of like a grieving moment for me.
Right.
I bought some things I've always wanted, like some motorcycles, quads, ATVs, this and that, whatever. Started buying some stuff. Started going to the desert with my dad a lot, doing stuff like that. And hang out
This
with the kids.
feels like a divorce / midlife crisis.
It was. I think it was. I went to Vegas, stuff like that. But so I did that kind of stuff, and then I started turning it around. Like, I think for me, because with my ex-wife, when we were married, she was how do I say, not the brightest financial person in the world, and I thought she was because she worked at a bank. When I met her, I thought that was like, oh, she works at a bank. She must know how to handle finances. So when I did give her the finances at one point in our marriage, because I was very stressed out by everything, had to take a job that paid less than half what I was making before because the economy crashed at 2009 and all that. I was very stressed out. I was like, I can't handle this. Can you help figure this out? And she'll just give it all to me. I'll take care of it. And what I did not know is that her taking care of it meant like, I'll just do whatever I want to do and whatever, and I won't take care of it. So, so I had a lot of debt and a lot of debt after we got divorced to take care of. Once I cleaned that stuff up, I started really focusing on turning it around for myself, because since we were married, I have done a lot of stuff.
Right.
Since divorce, I got my credit turned around. I paid off all my debts. I paid off my brand new truck. I paid that thing off in cash. I bought my first house, all by myself.
Yeah.
Here in San Diego.
That's a huge deal.
Like after
Sure.
And he put that
divorce.
on his Match profile, by the way.
Of course I did. because it's like people can't do that kind of stuff when they're married, let alone be by themselves, taking care of 2 kids. So we'll do all that stuff by myself.
Was there any moment though, Chris, in that where you were just like, I'm going to be okay?
I think once things started lining up, probably like the credit started turning around, the paying stuff off. I think financially, because like once I kind of like took, because I had her taking care of that stuff and she kind of ran it all to the ground. So once I kind of took that control back of figuring out, okay, this is what it looks like. Here's our budget. Here's the money coming in, money going out. I can totally pay that off, because when I was married before, she would have saw that as, we have extra money, let's blow it on something we don't need or whatever.
Let me ask you guys. So the power in the story is you've wandered through that. You've gone through the desert,
right,
and then God has redeemed that. What would you say to somebody who's listening right now, and maybe they've wandered through an experience similar, or maybe they're just struggling with their kids, or they lost their job? What is the message that you would give somebody who is walking out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we've talked a lot about the getting knocked down, but not much about the how we got back up part of it.
Right.
And for me, God had to get me by myself. And this is where I'm going to cry. I had to move away from everything. God opened a door for me for a job down here in San Diego. And just a couple weeks before I was supposed to leave, after I'd resigned and they'd backfilled my job, my former spouse took action to not allow me to move my son with me, who was supposed to come with me. And so I knew God was calling me here. He'd opened incredible doors for me. And then I was hopeful that I was going to get this fresh start with my son. But then it was, and now he doesn't get to come either. And I didn't have family down here. I didn't have any friends. I was going to be completely alone. And I had to walk that out. And God needed to get me alone for me to be able to heal. Because I think what happens, and Chris and I have talked about this a lot, is that when individuals go through infidelity, if they haven't grappled with being okay with being alone and healing, they'll jump into something else. And those same hurts, habits, and hangups will follow them into that next relationship. And that's part of why the stats for second marriages are that 67% of them fail. It's because people don't get to the point where they can be okay with being satisfied with their relationship with God sustaining them instead of looking to somebody else in flesh and blood. Because if we look at that person's always going to disappoint us, but God's not. And so for me, I had to step it out. I started dating a little bit, and God had to tell me again, no, you're not ready. And so right before I met Chris, what we didn't share is I did a dating fast for 5 months. I did
A dating what?
A fast, like a dating hiatus completely.
Oh, I think like dating fast, like fast dating to people.
No.
Yeah, that was Chris's response.
No.
I'm going to guess I got to get him in quick because the
Expiration date.
it's going to run out.
But I went like completely, one of my girlfriends and I, that she was in my Bible study that I'd started, I got connected with a church group down here, and I started leading a small group. And then I was in this pattern of dating the wrong guys down here. And God told me, like, I don't give you permission to date right now. And so I had to be obedient and not date for 5 months. And then, after I went home to visit my mom, it was in May of 2018. She said, you've changed a lot. Have you considered starting to date again? And I said, well, when God gives me permission, I will. And that Sunday at church, there was this sermon that was just affirming to me. And I was like, now I feel like I can walk into this as a whole person and a more healed, not completely healed person, that I can be my true self in a relationship. And 2 weeks later, not that this happens for everyone, but 2 weeks later was when Chris and I connected. And
A man willing to be involved in your life and change the spelling of his name for you.
I know. Mostly for the
Wow.
podcast, though. But,
Wow.
And Christine, too.
Hey, I want to read you something. All right. I don't know if you're a Brene Brown fan.
I'm a huge Brene Brown
Okay.
fan.
Oh, yeah.
So she writes this: so many of us have knowingly created or unknowingly allowed a long list of worthiness prerequisites. I'll be worthy if I lose 20 pounds. I'll be worthy if I can get pregnant. I'll be worthy if I stay sober. I'll be worthy if everyone thinks I'm a good parent. I'll be worthy when I can make a living selling my art. I'll be worthy if I can hold my marriage together. I'll be worthy when I make partner. I'll be worthy when my parents finally approve. I'll be worthy if he calls me back and asks me out. I'll be worthy when I can do it all and look like I'm not even trying. And it's truly at the heart of wholeheartedness. Worthy now. Not if, not when. We're worthy of love and belonging now, right this minute, as is. It's not a spouse. It's not a life situation. It's not a lifted truck. Sorry, Chris. It's in this moment, who you are, good, bad, strength, weakness. God values you.
Yep. And I think that going off of that, that's one of the things that's bonded me so closely with Chris, is that he sees the real me and holds me accountable for being the real me, and has helped me to even still work through some of my own challenges. And I would hope that I do the same for him.
Oh, she challenges me every day.
But, being in a relationship with him, we're different from what we typically would date, but what helps us to work is those things that were perhaps absent from our first relationship, like the communication, the openness with finances, the discussing what our boundaries are as it relates to like what constitutes cheating. You have to talk about those kinds of things, because sometimes there's taboo subjects and people don't talk about, like pornography, and that it doesn't have any place in a relationship, and why, like what that actually equates to. You just make assumptions, especially in the church. There's things we just don't talk about because it's not very Christian of us. But if you don't talk about them, people make assumptions about whether they are or aren't okay. So we have conversations about the hard stuff, and it is hard work, harder than anything I've ever done before, to have an open and honest relationship with each other, to where we go into this eyes wide open.
And I'm very honest too. Like I pulled the curtain back on all the finances, on what we make, what we spend, just stuff that a lot of people are just like, I ain't sharing that information. Even when they're married, they don't share the information, which I think is kind of weird, Right.
Yeah. Jonathan, you've been kind of paying attention to all this. What is it as you see this situation playing out, and What kind of challenge would you make to people who are walking down a difficult season like this?
Well, I think just what you said, just having the open communication. I feel like there's a lot of relational stuff that is just not open communication. Like, I remember my wife worked at a bank for a while, and she was always just like, man, a lot of these people, like they're as married couples, like they have two separate worlds when it comes to finances and like separate bank accounts that the other one doesn't have access to and all this. But that's their normal. That's just the way they've agreed upon doing it. And I don't know, I guess that could be okay. But I could also say there's definitely a big old barrier in your relationship where you haven't really come together in that sense. So I think just having conversation, like my wife and I went, we were talking about the Taken documentary that we just did a podcast with Monica about, and we just went on a walk and we were just talking about it the whole time, and really getting her thoughts on it, getting my thoughts on it, kind of pulling everything to the surface, and I just think that's healthy. Like, you just know where the other person is, and I don't, like, did you guys find that you had those conversations in your first marriage, or did you?
I tried to, but my ex-wife, she didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear it. Like, whatever, Chris, whatever. What do you want to talk about? Not right now, Chris, whatever, Yeah. And I think the thing too is, like, everybody has to remember this, is that when you're in a relationship with somebody, marriage or dating or whatever, especially marriage, you guys, it's a team. And the team, like any team, the goal is to win the game.
Right.
And if not everyone's doing their part, not everyone's helping out. If one guy is out there doing, I don't know, flower daisies, running around in the field, not catching the fly balls, you're going to lose.
One of the things we were talking about actually in our podcast recently is about also how building a family is like a business, where you have to have conversations around the financial operations and around the different transactions. And, you don't go out to start a brand new business and be like, you know what? In 2 years, I want to be bankrupt. That is going to be my sign of success. You go out there with these hopes and dreams, and then you build a plan, and then you execute the plan. And that might seem like hyper logical. I mean, we absolutely are in love, but there is a logical component of it of we're going to have conversations about the things that can be hangups, because we don't want to end up becoming a statistic, and we want to set ourselves up for success, especially as we're blending our families and bringing 3 children together who have already been through things that have been hard. I mean, Chris's boys were really young when he went through the divorce. My son was 10, and he remembers what that fiber was like to tear apart.
Sure.
So we definitely, we want to go into this with having the conversations. Just a kind of funny side note, on our 3rd date, Chris opened up his Credit Karma app and showed me his credit score, and he was super proud of it. And it might have been something that he felt like he was bragging about, but for me, coming through financial ruin and financial, I don't want to call it abuse, but deception and betrayal, having somebody be that open with me from the get-go was like, oh, he's putting all of his cards out on the table, and he's been like that every single day since.
Well, thank you.
I can see how that makes total sense, but for a 3rd date, that's weird.
I didn't buy her
It was
car.
it was on the topic of
so
finances.
my
wife wouldn't have married me if I showed her my credit score.
So let me maybe put a cap on this, all right? Because we got different marriage. I mean, Jonathan's 21. I got 33 years of marriage, and to my best friend in the world. And sometimes that you can kind of feel like bragging, especially in San Diego. It's like the record,
Right. 33 years.
Listen, there's the only way we make it through any of this, whether it's first marriage, second marriage, raising kids, work situation, is you need somebody to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
And God can fill in the gaps for the weaknesses that we have, the mistakes that we make. I mean, you are starting a brand new union with 2 people who are still better suited, better prepared, but still have your own weaknesses.
Yep.
The only way it'll ever work or work with your kids is that God fills in the gap. And I think there's a time when you feel like, well, yeah, my 10-year-old, he remembers that. You know what? God has this way of taking the hurts and the pains of even them and using it for good. So that's what our prayer will be for you guys. Hey, thanks for coming in today, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right.
What's your podcast called?
It is the Chris and Christine Show.
How is
And
Chris
that's Chris
spelled?
and Christine with
how's Chris
K's.
spelled?
With K's.
With K's.
Yes, if you guys want to hear more of these guys,
cute. Very cute.
they have how often do you guys post episodes?
Every single week.
Yep.
So usually on the weekends, and so it's up by Monday morning.
Yep,
All right.
you can find us
Sounds
at
good.
chrisandchristineshow.com or K2 Show San Diego across our social media accounts.
Nice. Well,
Sounds
thanks for
good.
being here.
All right,
for
guys.
having us.
Thanks bunch.
Remember this week that life is too short to wake up in the morning with regret.
So love the people who treat you right, forget about the ones who don't, and believe that everything happens for a reason.
If you get a chance, take it. If it changes your life, let it. Nobody said that it would be easy.
They just promised it would be worth it. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Chris.
And I'm Christine, and until next week,
Keep moving forward.